Hello and welcome to What Makes This Bike Great, and today we're talking about the Ducati 749R. This without doubt is the best supersport bike Ducati have ever made. And why is that important? Well, Ducati supersport bikes are generally much more fun to ride on the road and even more on the track than their superbike sisters. The engines are smaller and revvier, you get more impression of speed, and the chassis are generally more nimble, so they handle better too. The 749R is very different from the standard 749 road bike, and is actually more of a gap between the base model and the R than there was with the 748 and the 748R. Ducati really threw the kitchen sink at this, and it was the last time Ducati ever really gave any of their supersport bikes the R treatment. There was no R for the 848, 899, 959 or V2. This particular model is a 2004. This is when the 749R was launched, and I remember back in the day when I first joined MCN, this was one of the first Ducati supersport bikes I ever rode. These were the days of when supersport bikes were really popular. You had the CBR 600RR, the R6, the ZX6, and those screaming fours really ruled the roost, and they were much better than the 749 of the day until this came along. And I remember riding this and thinking it's proper special, with performance really to kick the four cylinders into touch. So this 2004 749R, the first of the breed, this came out March the 10th 2004. MCN did a launch report of it. It's Ducati at its decadent best. This is Ducati building a bike to win races, but because it was a supersport bike and not a super bike, it was relatively, in Ducati terms, affordable. It cost £13,595. It was also the prettiest of the 749 and 999 era. Now, as we all know, looking back through time, the 999 and 749 wasn't that successful. It was a big departure in styling from the 916 family of bikes that ended with the 998, and it didn't sell by the truckload. And in actual fact, you know, it probably brought a lot of Ducati dealers close to their knees. Ducati struggled themselves, and it led them to bring out the 1098 2007 double quick, really, to save their skin. But the 749R was a little bit different. So we go into the actual detail of it in a minute, but the thing that really sets this aside and gives it more of a kind of a presence is really a couple of things. So the fuel tank was enlarged from 15 litres to 18 litres. So it's kind of got a humpback fuel tank, and it makes the bike feel more muscular. With a flat tank, the whole bike is kind of very flat. Then you've got the single seat unit with the white number plate, and from a distance, this thing looks absolutely amazing, and I think it's actually matured with age, because when you get up close to this now, this looks like a proper factory superbike, and back in the day I just don't think we appreciated that. So being an R, as you can imagine, it's got lots of special parts, bodywork and chassis. So the bodywork on the 2004 model was carbon fibre. The nose is carbon, the fairing lows are carbon, and there's lots of nice exposed carbon there. The Ducati logo is actually the bare carbon behind the paint and looks absolutely beautiful. It had Öhlins fully adjustable forks and rear shock, radial mounted Brembos, an underbrace swing arm from the 999R and World Superbike, forged aluminium Marcassini wheels. The tubular steel trellis frame was the same as the 749, but it's got adjustable swing arm pivot and adjustable head angle, and that 999R swing arm was double-sided. So if you remember, that was another big bone of contention back in the day, moving from the single-sided 916 swing arm to the double-sider, and then of course when the 1098 came out, it went back to a single-sider. But the real devil in the detail of this bike is its Testa Stretta engine. Built to go racing, it was completely different to the 749R. Power was up from 110 bhp to 118 bhp, and that was done thanks to a harder revving, shorter stroke engine, with a capacity that was slightly up on the 749 741.1cc to 749.5cc. It also had titanium conrods and valves, revised fuel injection system and ECU, a slipper clutch as standard, and a deep sump. It had magnesium engine covers, but the exhaust was a road legal unit with this carbon shroud around the outside. and the all-up weight of the 749R was 192 kilos wet. So not the lightest bike in the world, but certainly well under the magical 200 kilo mark. And really, if you're going to get a 749R, this 04 model is the one to go for, because it is the only one with a carbon fibre fairing. For the 05 and 06 749Rs, they went to a lighter plastic, which they said was better, but it's probably just because it was cheaper to make. So the 04 is the only one with the proper bling-tastic carbon fairing. This particular bike isn't exactly standard. It's quite special. And I've written a list of things that it comes with. So this bike isn't a 749. It's got a big bore kit. It's an 848cc big bore kit, and it makes 130 bhp at the back wheel on the dyno of BSD Performance near Peterborough. And that makes it a 999R beta with that kind of power, which is pretty impressive. It's got a different clutch slave cylinder. It's got carbon fibre inlet trumpets, ported heads, pistol pistons. It's got magnesium Marcassini wheels, a full race system with a Termi can. It's got different clip-ons, lots of carbon goodies dotted around the bike. Things like the hugger, the exhaust guard, the heel guard, they weren't standard. It's got an open clutch cover, so that dry clutch really jangles. And it's got racing pressure plates and basket. And then this fuel tank is really interesting actually. So this is actually non-standard. It's a Ducati Performance Part fuel tank, which you could buy back in the day. And it's not carbon fibre, but it's actually been manufactured with a carbon wrap, and then the carbon has been masked off, and then the rest of the fuel tank painted red in the same kind of way that the fairing exposes the carbon fibre there, and it looks absolutely fantastic. I spent a little bit of time with this 749R now, and it is incredible. It really is. Just to look at, it's so special. It looks like an R should. It's much more special, and there's much more drama about it than a modern day Ducati. To ride, it just takes me right back to when I first rode it. The riding position on 749s and 999s is very unique. You sit quite flat on the bike. You sit very much in the bike, and the bike kind of wraps around you. You're not perched on top of it like a modern day Panigale. And it's very, very narrow, really narrow. I mean, the bike's only one piston wide, obviously, because it's a V-twin. And with the dishes in the tank, when your knees are in the tank, it feels like your knees are almost touching. It's really, really good and not too uncomfortable. There's loads of room back and forward in the seat. The pegs aren't too high. The bars are a little bit of a stretch, puts a little bit of weight on your wrists, but it's beautiful to ride. And that engine absolutely booms. When you're close to it, just revving up, it sounds like a race bike. It just absolutely sounds like a race bike, and it shakes the floor. These are back in the days where they didn't have to have loads of Euro sound deadening in the engine itself, which they do now. So this is an old school Ducati engine that was set off car alarms. It's absolutely fantastic. It sounds great when you're revving it through this Terminoni pipe. But actually on the move, it's not too loud, but just standing around it at a standstill when it's being blipped, it is just magnificent. And it's got a bite which is almost as savage as its bark. This particular bike with 130 bhp does not hang around. I mean, this is kind of a V-twin version of a Suzuki GSX-R 750. Just the right balance of power and handling. It's a really nice flat spread of power. It gets stronger and stronger as it climbs up through the revs. It's a little bit lumpy down low, which you'd expect a big V-twin to be, especially as it's quite long geared. But you know, once you let this thing off its leash, it is fantastic. The 749R's handling is just as impressive as everything else. It's a very long and low bike, so it's very, very stable through fast corners. Not the fastest steering bike, but you can muscle it into corners, a lot of counter steer, a lot of body English to get the bike into the corner. And once it's at full lean, it absolutely rock solid. And it just goes exactly where you want it, which for a 20-year-old bike is really impressive. This bike does not feel its age at all. And the brakes as well, absolutely stunning. No rider aids to clog up the riding experience on this, no ABS. It just does everything with such purity and with such accuracy. And you know, the character of this bike, the way it's kind of so long and low and stable, was actually carried through to Ducati's racing bikes. I remember I was lucky enough to ride the 2006 and 2007 Desmis Sedicis, the 990 and the 800, and it felt just the same as this bike, albeit with a lot more power. Very low, very long, you're sat right in the bike, very stable, just an absolute beautiful bike to ride. Beautiful homologation special machines like this don't really exist anymore. Okay, maybe you could say that Ducati's current Panigale V4R is a homologation special, and it is, and it has got a different engine to go racing, but I mean, it is so expensive. No normal person could afford to buy that bike and use it as it's intended. You could say that the Kawasaki ZX-10RR is a homologation special, which it is, but all of its special bits are inside its engine, so it can go racing. The rest of the bike is relatively normal. We live in a day now where World Superbikes are kind of mainly based on production bikes, so you don't get those homologation specials anymore. And then especially in the Supersport world, Supersport kind of almost died off a few years ago, but now it's come back alive thanks to balancing rules and Evo rules, which allow different size bikes to race in Supersport. But again, there are no hot R or SP versions to enjoy anymore. So the 749R is a genuine slice of Ducati racing history. This is one very special motorcycle, one that's beautifully built, one that sounds incredible, one that performs amazingly and just makes you feel good when you ride it. And that's what makes this bike great. Thanks very much for watching, and before I sign off, I just want to say a big thanks to my good friend Joe Dick, a very trusting Joe Dick, who's allowed me to spend time with his Ducati 749R and absolutely made my day. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more like this coming very soon.